got my templates all printed out, and I have just cut them roughly. I haven't tried to cut them accurately. We'll do all that when we finished our sewing. And I've got my little diagram here just to help me work out what's what. Now, I think this is going to be confusing. I'm going to make a mistake if I don't remind myself what bits I want to be in my dark fabric and what bits I want to be in my light fabric. For example, this is the window section, and looking at my chart, we are here, and I know I want that bit to be pale to separate it from the roof, and that bit's going to be dark. And then there's two windows here which want to be pale, and that's going to be dark. So what I'm going to do just quickly is just remind myself where to put my fabric. And this paper will be uppermost for you while you're sewing. You will not see your fabric when you're sewing. So you can put any sort of notes to yourself on the paper and you'll be able to see it. So I've just done that really, really roughly. Okay, so do that with everything. And then when it comes to subdividing and prepping your fabric, I'll just move this all out of the way quickly. Lots of bits to sew. I'll do it on the flat cord there, on the flying geese. So when we've got these flying geese, I want my geese to be dark. You can have them pale, it's up to you. You should have plenty of fabric. Okay, so I'm going to have dark geese. I'm just going to scribble those all in. And then I have a fat quarter. And I've given these a press. So I've got a fat quarter to manage. And what I don't really want to do is start offering up a whole fat quarter underneath each one of these elements, because they're just going to get in the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure how big my bit needs to be. So it's 2 inches finished. So if I cut a strip about 2.5 inches or even 3 inches wide, that gives me masses to put underneath, and then it's easier for me to manage that fabric. So I'm going to cut myself some strips. 2.5 inches wide. You can make yourself templates if you want for your fabrics, and you're really thrifty. You can cut a shape with the right seam allowance on into the right shape. So you can cut yourself a triangle, one of these triangles with seam allowance on if you want, and that's the thriftiest way of doing it. It's most helpful when the pattern pieces are going to be highly repeated. So maybe you want to do that with the geese. I can't say I'm going to. We've got a fat quarter. We should have plenty of fabric. Okay, so I'm just going to self-organised. Move my paper out of the way because I'm going to cut that, aren't I? I'm not careful. You can do this with all the shapes if you want, but definitely don't want to be moving a whole fat quarter around every time you're trying to foundation piece something. It will just annoy you. Obviously I've got lots more prep to do, but I'm just going to show you quickly. And then what we'll do is that can go underneath on my first piece there, and then I can divide that even more into rectangles, and that actually may be what I do. Let's subdivide that again. What you're going to do is you're going to be all fingers and thumbs the first couple of bits that you make, and then you'll get into a rhythm of it. The most important thing with foundation is that you are using the templates for your accuracy. Everything relies on the use of the template. So if I cut that again into about 1.5, we should have plenty. Let me see. So it's 1 inch finish, yeah. So if I cut 1.5 inch strips there, 1.5. I'm doing this really, really slowly and doing one at a time, and actually I'd probably do a lot more prep and have it all done. So now you can see that that is going to cover carefully. Now, the first fabric I've chosen is pretty directional. As you can see, your fat quarter may be different, it might be the same as mine. So now I've made the flying geese so that they've got that vertical stripe. I'm going to try and keep that consistent through my piecing. So get your templates ready, colour them in if you think that's helpful. I do. And then you can subdivide a few bits. Don't prep miles ahead. Get your head around what you're doing, slow and steady, and then you won't make so many mistakes, and you can just gradually build confidence. And when you're confident, you can then go ahead and prep the rest. It's the same process really for the paler fabric. All I've done is I've cut 1.5 inch squares, and they will cover, they'll be like that actually, won't they, on the back. They're plenty big enough to cover the little pale triangles in the back of the flying geese. You can work out the seam allowance and do cut triangles if you want. Just cut some squares. And then on this block, which is the one we were colouring in earlier, the windows, and then this little strip of pale that separates the roof from the body of the house. So I'm just going to cut myself a long thin strip, which is, let me see, what measurement will we do? So it needs to be, so yeah, it's 4, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4/8 finish. So if I cut myself like a piece that's about 3/4 of an inch wide, that should do that. There's also another little section of that, so we're just going to cut the full width of fabric, and we'll cut ourselves about 3/4 of an inch. You could cut wider if you want. You can cut accurately, it's up to you. This will be just fine. I'm not worried about these gulls and the directionality so much as I was with the stripe, because these are more of a random thing. I'm not going to worry about cutting that to the right length, because there's more that I will be able to use it for later, so I can do that. And again, with these windows, I'm just going to work out a sort of strip, put it under the camera, Janet, work out a strip measurement that will work for that. So look, they're just 1.25 finished, 1.5 feels a bit tight to me. So again, if I cut 1 3/4, I'll have plenty, but not so much waste that I'm not being careful with my fabric. I don't like wasting fabric. I know you can buy more, but treat what you've got very well. Okay. You can subdivide this if you want. You can just leave it as one strip, but don't get yourself so prepped ahead unless you're very familiar with foundation. Just slow and steady, work out what you're doing, work out where you want to economize, how much seam allowance you like with your foundation piecing, how accurate you like to be. And our next step is to go and set up our sewing machines.